In the year 2000, Sega released a game-changing title for the Dreamcast.
Jet Set Radio! Oh wait, hold on.
Jet Set Radio!
2 years later, Sega would release another installment in the series.
Jet Set Radio Future, tune into the new revolution.
Rated T for Teen, new and only on Xbox.
If you'd like to learn more about the history of these games, be sure to check out my documentary feature, Masterpieces, Jet Set Radio Future. As of the making of this, it has been 21 years since a new installment has been developed for the mainline series. To put that into perspective, Jet Set Radio Future, at the time of its release in 2002, aimed to depict a futuristic Tokyo set in the year 2024. That is now less than a year away. Over the decades, the Jet Set Radio games have developed a cult following of passionate fans that have tried everything to get Sega's attention to make a third Jet Set Radio game. Some of those fans were game developers who took matters into their own hands and conceptualized potential sequels.
What's up, everybody? False Proof here, the godfather of Jet Set Radio content, and trust me, I got receipts on that. Kay's got the receipts because Kay's the one who said it, so, I mean, it must be true if somebody else says it, right? Anyway, today we're here to talk about some Jet Set Radio leaks, rumors, proposed projects, all the fun times we could have gotten a third Jet Set Radio game, and we didn't.
We would like to play.
It's another late night for gamers as they wait to try out the latest game system. The Nintendo Wii goes on sale at midnight.
In 2006, Kuju Entertainment came up with a proposal for a new Jet Set Radio game on the Nintendo Wii and pitched it to Sega. Prior to their pitch, the near 100-person powered studio had developed games like Battalion Wars for GameCube and Call of Duty Finest Hour for GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. Jet Set Radio for the Wii could have offered the most immersive experience yet, with motion controls guiding skating tricks and graffiti tagging, and the speaker of the Wiimote being utilized for DJ Professor K to speak directly to the player during gameplay.
The traditional controller is replaced by a device that allows players to be involved in the game like never before.
Is this footage going to come back to haunt us or what?
It is already haunting us.
You know, you'd use the Wiimote as a graffiti spray can, you'd shake it. You'd probably have to shake it in order for it to work.
I feel like that would have been incredibly troublesome, and I probably would have loved it.
Other Sega titles, when they kind of went to the Wii, they didn't really perform as well, both on the console itself in terms of gameplay, but also in terms of sales.
There's been several revivals that have just fallen flat from Sega in this era. 2006 famously gave us Sonic the Hedgehog 2006.
There's a bomb in that area. We need to be careful when opening.
There was also Super Monkey Ball Adventure around this time. So as you can see, they were trying these kind of Wii PS2 downgrades for popular franchises, and they were not doing too well. So with that in mind, maybe we dodged a bullet here.
I feel like Jet Set Radio could have done something fun with maybe like the graffiti can, you know, spraying those giant murals. You could do something with the Wiimote in that sort of motion, kind of following the arrows as you would in the first game. That could be kind of cool. Like, I mean, outside of that, this would have just kind of been, you know, a normal action platformer that kind of got held back by the control scheme of the Wii.
With this new style of gameplay came new styles of gangs as well.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Concept art from Corey Ray Lewis showcases designs of reimagined characters like Beat, Gum, Tab, and DJ Professor K that would have been used for Kuju Entertainment's reimagining of Jet Set Radio.
I think that Jet Set Radio Wii has a really interesting thing going on. It's playful, it's loud, it's fun, it's colorful, but it's obviously a little different from the usual Jet Set Radio style. There's a clear intention here to appeal to a slightly younger audience than the previous games, since this is the Wii, and there were plenty of games doing something similar around that time.
I love the art concept. Beat looks great, Gum looks great. There was even some new characters that were kind of different.
I really love the outfit changes and the tweaks that they make to the character design.
It looked kind of rustic and it had some rough edges to it, like Gum's pants is kind of like torn at the bottom, and Beat's bandana has like little hairs at the end.
It's a very interesting balance between cool, edgy, goofy, and cute.
Looking at the art style, I really enjoyed these concept sketches.
Concept art of items and gangs depicted manga-esque designs that captured the essence of Jet Set Radio's funky spirit.
To be quite honest, it still feels like fan art. It doesn't feel like something that you would truly see from a third game in the series from the franchise creators.
New characters like Swivel Nozzle Ninja and new gangs like the Squabble Hawks could have instilled new life into the series.
I think Swivel Nozzle Ninja looks really freaking dope. It kind of sucks that we'll never see like this character in their full form. There's obviously like the ninja aspect to it, and how does that work out with rollerblading and graffiti? Like does the story tie in there? I'm very curious.
Swivel Nozzle Ninja, I understand what he's about off rip. I think that dude's sick. I want to try skating with a sword now. The game doesn't exist. There's no disclaimer saying I can't, so I might just try that.
I feel like the Swivel Nozzle Ninjas probably would be coming from maybe a town with a ancient castle.
Those sandal skates that he has, freaking fire, dude. I want a pair of those. The only thing about him is like the mask looks a little Immortals derivative. He'd look really cool with like an Oni samurai mask or something, with like the big teeth. I think that'd look fire.
Funny thing, I actually didn't know about Swivel Nozzle Ninja until I actually saw this document. Definitely gives me the vibe that they would either be associated or feuding with the Immortals, kind of have that like bit of an undead look if you kind of view the face and the eyes.
Obviously, Hawks from My Hero Academia is super huge, so I feel like they might have had a missed opportunity there by not having a game that includes this character.
It's nice to see some new additions, but at the same time, it was a little questionable, like,
It still captures the Jet Set Radio essence, which I love and adore.
The design's definitely interesting, and obviously the Squabble Hawks are, you know, very animal-based. Definitely probably would be rivals of Poison Jam. But I mean, I would have loved to see those two gangs kind of run it back, you know? Figure out who is really owning the territory of Tokyo Toe.
Squabble Hawks and Swivel Nozzle Ninja, they sound like villain names that would be in a Jet Set Radio game. They did a very good job of creating new characters, but still keeping it accurate to what the game represents and feels like.
It's still punchy, it's still edgy, just with a bit more of a bright and poppy, youthful look. The characters all have really interesting, jagged, zigzaggy qualities to their line art that I think helps bring in some of that Jet Set Radio edge.
Upon rumors of this pitch spreading around the net, it was also rumored that Sega rejected the project due to conflicts with then-current plans for a new installment in the Jet Set Radio series. Of course, now we know those plans never came to fruition. Regardless, fans have tried to drum up hype for a new game ever since. Fast forward 11 years, a new game studio would try their hand at pitching their own imaginative take on the Jet Set Radio series.
My name's Jesse Sosa. I work over at Gearbox Software, working on games such as Borderlands and Wonderlands. My personal studio, Dinosaur Entertainment, has been around since 2011. Started off as kind of a side project with me and one of my best friends. We were looking for a way to work on other projects on the side for fun, to make our own little games and stuff like that. In 2014, I went to Brazil to start a studio down there. We were working on mobile games and we were pushing the mobile hardware at the time to its limits. We had some dead time between projects, and in the back of my mind, I was like, I have an idea. I've always wanted to prove this out. And it was basically an offshoot of Jet Set Radio. I started a project called Project Halftone, which the closest I can describe it was Spider-Verse stuff. Halftone patterns, sketch patterns, outlines that were crazy and stuff like that. At the studio, we got pretty far. We had this whole idea of teenage youth, teenage rebellion, against corporations and the man, right? And we were wondering what a future would look like where everything was ruled by a very clean aesthetic, something that's very iPhone-like, very Apple-like. I wanted to contrast that heavily with 70s and 80s punk. So we started working on this project just to kind of keep the artist going and to push the limits of this phone. We got pretty far on the whole thing. And then there was some creative differences at the studio. Creative director had to stop working on that and started working on something else. So we decided to kind of go rogue. And then we were like, well, what do we do next? I'm like, well, let's just work on Project Halftone, but let's change it. And they were like, what do you have in mind? I'm like, let's do Jet Set Radio.
This resulted in their creative idea to tweak the work they had completed to fit a new vision, a vision that took Jet Set Radio Future's spirit to heart, as they reimagined a new remixed version of Jet Set Radio.
What is your relationship with Jet Set Radio?
Oh, my relationship with Jet Set Radio runs pretty deep. When I first played it, I didn't know games could look like that. As an artist, visuals are very important to me. As an art director, I'm always out looking for interesting visual styles. Developing a game is much more than just simply having a gameplay idea. And gameplay to me is probably the most important thing. But if you're not thinking about the music, if you're not thinking about the visuals, the gameplay, everything all together at once to build it up together, it's just not going to work. Not like this. Jet Set Radio Future, that became my favorite version of Jet Set Radio. It's rare that you can take a game and then have such an impression on the art world in general, and then make a sequel to it and have that same exact impression. Ever since then, I've been chasing that same high. With every new console generation, you get all these extra CPU cycles. It's like, well, what can we do with it? And unfortunately, in our industry, everyone's just like, just make it look more real. I find more fun and infinitely more challenge in what would this look like as a painting by Van Gogh, right? And how can we do that in real time? This has been sitting in the back of my head for so long that I knew immediately what I was going to do with Gum. I just sketched her out real fast, like it's literally a garbage napkin sketch. At the time, Jet Set Radio, their characters and stuff were influenced by graffiti art, and so everything was chunky and big and very bottom heavy with big old Jinko jeans, like that were real popular at the turn of the century. That stuff wasn't necessarily popular anymore. I was taking inspiration from some of the real popular sculptors in Japan that were putting out these statues, and there was one specifically of Yoko from Gurren Lagann. The proportions there, and along with other statues that were coming out at the time, were very inspiring to me. It was almost kind of like, it was like anime, but it was just a little bit more grown up, if you will. Like, it was a little bit more mature in terms of like the proportions and the styles and the way things were being presented. That basically led the entire design. Before I knew it, we had Gum and we had Beat. The Beat just followed organically right after Gum. He's the face of Jet Set Radio Future. I accomplished my initial goal, which is just to see the shader and these characters, and then I had another goal of like, well, what would a city look like later, And so I got with one of my friends, Doug, who's an environment artist, and I was like, hey man, can you help me build like some of the city? And he was like, sure. And so he put together the city that's in our little demo. It's just like a block of the Shibuya 109 intersection there. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to model some cars in this too. So I started modeling some cars in the same style that I was thinking for Jet Set Radio Evolution. That was a lot of fun. And so I was like, cool, we got GDC coming up, so maybe I can get some art contracts with this.
The 2017 Game Developers Conference was packed with ripe indie game studios looking for potential work with major publishers.
And people were going in person to kind of, mingle and network with the games industry.
One of those studios was Dinosaur Games. Their concept art for Jet Set Radio Evolution caught Sony's eye, and Sony followed up with a request to see the concept art in motion. In the coming week, they spent countless hours bringing that vision to life.
Put it all together. We had to learn all the cinematic tools and everything. He also asked for some business plans and stuff like that. So I just, extrapolated the whole idea, right? And we sent it off. When it was done, loved it, but ultimately, the visions just didn't line up with Sega and their plans.
Even though their passionate hard work astonished the Atlas division of Sony, it wasn't enough. The new vision for a futuristic Jet Set Radio was turned down without a reason being provided.
Sega and Sony haven't had as much of a, close-knit relationship as, say, maybe Sega and Nintendo when they finally moved away from doing hardware and started putting more of the Sonic games on the Nintendo stuff. Or even, Sega and Microsoft when they had that really close relationship for the launch of the Xbox. So this was kind of interesting that we could have perhaps maybe have had something from Sega that may or may not have been exclusively on PlayStation.
There are a lot of differences between technology, fashion, music, character design, and even aggressive inline skating between 2002 and 2017. Jet Set Radio Evo shows how those differences didn't just disappear. Those trends didn't just go away. They transformed.
The environment looks amazing. I think it's perfect. It's very colorful and it's very vibrant, but it's not in your face and it's not overwhelming.
Instead of black outlines, it's going with colored outlines. The environments themselves feel a lot more like you're in the Matrix.
They took a lot of what Jet Set Radio was already doing with experimenting with shapes and color, and they just amped it up even further.
The colors in this art style are balanced very well.
The art looks so pretty. It looks like what you see now in video games, especially in the indie game genre, with the vivid colors. It pops out. They stick to what they want to stick to, details. All about the details.
I think everyone agrees it looks pretty sleek. Again, the style feels very inspired by the original while taking it into its own new direction. The fact that it's so contrasted with that neon green and the really darker tones in the background, it feels a lot like some of the levels in Jet Set Radio Future, especially as you get further into the game. The Highway Zero, the Faro Park.
The outline is all right. I don't mind that too much, but maybe just having the entire game be this giant blast of neon-esque environments might have been a little bit much.
But that's the sort of thing a proof of concept doesn't need to worry about that gets ironed out in gameplay.
I really wish evolution would actually happened, because I remember seeing that online and being whoa, how cool would this be if this actually came through?
The character designs look really cool. I like the new redesigns for Beat and Gum and Roboy.
And of course, we were pressed for time with a lot of this stuff, so I was I don't know, do a robot, I guess, something quick and easy. And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, what about Roboy? I'm like, where did they get Roboy from? And so I started visualizing this story in my head where maybe Rokaku, I guess, right? Maybe they were doing some experiments, right? They were trying to push the whole law enforcement thing, and maybe the next step is autonomous drones. Maybe that's the direction they're going, and I can imagine the GGs at some point ran across a discarded body, or maybe they broke into a thing and found this robot, and they were like, oh, you know what, we can do something with this, and they took it and they reprogrammed it, and now it's just kind of like their buddy. And I was looking for something simple to model anyways, and I was like, well, this makes sense. And so that's what I did. I just started modeling Roboy, but I was like, what did Roboy look like before he got taken by the GGs, right? And so I was like, okay, so this is a step up, right? An evolution of their enemy design. There was all kinds of doodads and stuff that I had that we didn't get to see, but he's gonna have sonic weapons and things like that, but we just never got to that point. But his arms are going to be able to stretch out long to be able to hit you from a distance, so you're forced to go in there close. Just typical boss design. But that never was made, but that was all up in the brain.
Yeah, when I was looking at those designs, I was looking at his arms and I was like, I bet those would stretch out at some point.
These redesigns for Beat and Gum especially are just chef's kiss.
They're smoothed out, contoured, 3D modeled, reactive lighting based characters.
The colors and the waveform effect on Beat's goggles, I can practically hear the soundtrack just looking at those goggles.
We have the shader all set up, so when he's talking, and the music's playing, it would be bouncing. And right now we just have a generic heartbeat, but that heartbeat was supposed to be kind of like a spectrogram.
The horizontal hatching lines used for shading all over the clothing is a super interesting and unique effect. I've never seen it before. And it gives the impression of like a textured surface with like detail going on.
And I was messing with the values in the shader and I accidentally hit the wrong value, and it took the halftone dots and stretched them out. And it stretched them all out horizontally on them. And I looked at that and I was like, scan lines. Hell yeah. You can see the scan lines here for that shading, kind of like, again, like I said, like pushing a little bit more towards the sci-fi. It just felt right. We gave them all communicators on their wrists, so the Beat and Gum have a communicator there that, you know, they can like call into or whatever to talk with people. Because Beat has always come across to me as kind of like a laid-back character, like he's kind of into his own thing, especially in Future with stuff. So I was just like, screw it, I'll give him big-ass exhaust pipes. I don't know, we can do some cool stuff with that.
They went from like oversized Razor skates that were kind of blocky to these like buckled and strapped up. You've got your Aeons, you've got USDs. Like the way they look has transformed.
Visually, I think this game could have been the perfect Jet Set Radio 3, honestly. They managed to capture a more realistic look while losing none of that like loud, iconic punk rock spirit and energy from the originals.
What was going to be different about these new Jet Set Radio games that we didn't see in Jet Set Radio or Jet Set Radio Future?
Jet Set Radio Evolution was so much more than just concept art. What Dinosaur Games had come up with was a game design document that included an outline for a budget, game mechanics, environments, and story.
The story of Jet Set Radio Evolution, at least the in-game story, I wasn't going to mess with a good thing. It's the same type of story, you know, you got the GGs, you know, they rule Tokyo Toe and all that stuff. And, you know, it's just the rise of a new puppet master, right? He comes up and he's controlling the Rokoku group. And now they got to reassert their dominance. Evolution's always been in the back of the head, which is why we call it Jet Set Radio Evolution. It's always like, what aspects of the game can we evolve? One of the things that that always frustrated me about Jet Set Radio was their combat system. Their combat system was boiled down to spray canning stuff. And that's fine, but it always let me down whenever I was fighting bosses, and the bosses essentially turned into a chase mode. And then you had to spray paint them. And I would get really frustrated just chasing them because all I could do is just spray paint. Like, as frustrated as I was, I couldn't punch them, right? And that's what I wanted to do. I understand, like, there's a general vibe about Jet Set Radio. It's not about the violence. It's none of that. But there's a way to create a combat system that is not overtly violent. So I've always had this idea in my head, again, along with the art style, I just had this combat idea. The combat system was all designed around music. So my idea was to lock down the beats per minute for the soundtrack, faster or slower depending on the tone, but it's always going to be kind of like the same kind of like beat. We were wanting to develop a combat system that was based around skating tricks. So as you're skating, right, I want to take advantage of the outlines that the characters have. So when you get close to someone that you're ready to attack, their outline would start jittering, or your player character would start jittering, and you can kind of see theirs kind of jitter, so you can see who's targeting who. Similar to Batman Arkham Asylum, you have one button which is contextual. In Jet Set Radio, I would want it to be the trick button. So as you're grinding, you hit this button and you're doing tricks. You're going to, you know, gain speed and all that stuff. The difference is that when you're close to someone, you hit that button, instead of doing a trick, you'll kind of like maybe, I don't know, you'll do like a spin with your leg out, and then you'll hit them, right? But you'll jump in their general direction, right? And it's kind of like Batman Arkham Asylum, where you're kind of like leaping towards your selected target, which will allow you to chain attacks very easily. So when you have like a Rokoku cops all around you, you know, instead of just going like randomly and hoping that you hit them, you can actually be doing tricks, and they'll be dancing, break dancing, doing this and that, but they'll hit, and you'll be skating towards enemies, and it's just kind of like magneting you towards enemies. And I'm like, that sounds like fun.
That sounds amazing.
Feels right.
Yeah,
that feels right. You know, you would hit the buttons on the beat for additional multipliers and things like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, you get random chances of knocking people out, unconscious, whatever it is, but it doesn't penalize you if you're not good at hitting the beat. It's just there to guide you. So everything in the music mattered.
We don't know if they're going to do anything like this with a third game, but Dinosaur Games has kind of talked about maybe doing something similar. Now, they talked about this like 5 years ago. After they did the pitch, they said they were going to rework some things, maybe come out with something a little bit different. We don't know, but we'll have to just wait and see. But That seems to be the thing with this series a lot of the time. You wait and see and wait and see and...
Here we go now.
Since 2018, Dinosaur Games has kept their work on the down low, but fortunately, while speaking to Jesse for this documentary, I was able to get a sneak peek for their upcoming Untitled project, inspired by their work on Jet Set Radio Evolution. A year after Jesse worked on Jet Set Radio Evolution, he created more Jet Set Radio concept art for something else. Information about this project remains confidential. However, what I can do is read you what he wrote upon sharing his concepts on ArtStation. I made these two models in less than a week in early 2017. Let the speculation begin over what these were created for. These concepts showcase the array of talent, skill, and undying passion at Dinosaur Games. Come 2021, a new wave of hype for Jet Set Radio 3 would emerge. According to leaks found on Reddit and Twitter, here's the timeline. 2021, Sega holds an internal meeting to showcase works in development. 2022, rumors of Sega reviving old intellectual properties in the style of Fortnite with microtransactions begin to spread.
In April of 2022, Bloomberg reported that Sega was working on a new Jet Set Radio and Crazy Taxi game. From what we were told from some inside sources, as of July 2022, Sega was still moving ahead, and they shifted focus from Crazy Taxi to Jet Set Radio. And the goal was to nail down the art style and the gameplay focus, and that they were focusing on just about every aspect of the first two games. Everything was on the table. They were open to anything. And they were really trying to gauge what the best balance was for players. So if you prefer the open world of Jet Set Radio Future, but you like the graffiti technique of the original Jet Set Radio, and surveys showed that that was what fans wanted, then that's what Sega was going to deliver.
A survey is put out to examine the reception of various potential art styles for a new Jet Set Radio game.
What I found so fun and unique about Jet Set Radio is that it was made by a small team who didn't take very many notes from the higher ups. They kind of just made what they wanted to make, and it was a success. And then to see something like this that is a third Jet Set Radio, but being, I guess, crowdsourced for something like an art style is so bizarre to me.
Someone actually posted the concept art, the one that you see in the leak, on the Jet Set Radio subreddit, and people were originally kind of thinking like, oh, this is fan art, like it looks really weird. I don't really like this new look. I don't think it fits Jet Set Radio. And then as soon as people thought that this could be a possibility, they were just going absolutely nuts trying to find this leak.
I don't think the concept art was intentionally leaked because of the way that it was leaked to me. This stuff was shown to people in the know, in the community, some people who are writers for fan sites, some people who are journalists, some people who are just very vocal fans online. They sign an NDA and then they can't close the window or take screen caps or whatever. So they take photos of their screen. I was contacted directly from the guy who leaked it. They were sending me links to their tweet. And then I think they realized that there was a specific number on there, so they deleted it, but people had already downloaded and saved it. So some people got their hands on it. That's why I blur it, because I don't want to be the source. I don't want Sega to say, hey, we saw Barry's video and we read the number and now we're suing you. Not me, but him. I don't want to be an accomplice.
But I don't want the leaks. I kind of want to be surprised. I feel like as much as we want a new Jet Set Radio Future game, it just doesn't make sense to leak something that might be super dope if we didn't know what it was.
There's a lot of controversy about these. Since it's a leak, maybe the lighting's a little off, and it is concept as well.
We've got 4 variations on this piece of concept art. 1, a version with flat cell shading but realistic folds and shadow placement. 2 is a version with flat cell shading and more simplified anime style shadows and features. And 3 is a version that seems to combine cell shading and more realistic rendering on top of each other, as well as some more realistic body proportions and facial features. And then 4 is a version with heavy emphasis on bold, dark outlines and detailed shading. Out of these 4, number 2 is the one that best suits Jet Set Radio and best matches the original games. So I'm very glad that the later leak seems to imply that this was probably the route they've gone forward with.
It seems like they're just kind of reviving Jet Set Radio using elements of 1 and 2 a little bit and then pushing it much more realistically. I'm intrigued by the concept art, and I'm actually not put off by it like I was with past external efforts. What I always say about a Jet Set Radio 3, you need to have a reason to make it, and you need to have something special to have it stand out, especially when Jet Set Radio and Jet Set Radio Future were so different from each other. What else can they do with it? That's what I want to see.
2023, a video from the 2021 Sega internal meeting surfaces online. Now, let's break it down. The meeting held in 2021 was allegedly done so to showcase upcoming games Sega had in development. Based on the leaked video in 2023, if it's real, it can be discerned that the video was used to highlight a remake of Persona 3, Sonic Frontiers DLC, and a new Jet Set Radio game.
And the reason why people think this one's going to happen is because the 2 other things that were included in this leak actually wound up being a reality.
When the leaked video from April 2023 is examined in detail, we can see that many elements of its makeup match the concept art that was featured in the 2022 leaked survey. The main character, Beat, dances in retro-inspired attire with a modern twist. A high-collared, baggy golden jacket with lettering on the front is paired with gunmetal gray pants, large headphones, the classic alien-eyed goggles or sunglasses, and skates that seem to be inspired by shoes and footwear. 2 modern neon green wheels are mounted on the bottom of each skate, separated by a metal bar for grinding. If we slow down the video and take a closer look, it can also be seen that a jet function was also incorporated into the design, as there appears to be some kind of propulsion exhaust pipe on the back of each skate. The colors of the skates are red, gold, and white, matching the rest of Beat's outfit.
I like the joggers. I like the sort of J-pop style that he has going on.
It's kind of a merge between Jet Set Radio and almost Persona-ish. At least looking at the background, I can definitely see that being the Shibuya area that you kind of explored in Persona a little bit. And I'd be curious as to just how big that environment is.
I would like to see something a bit different. This is probably just placeholder for development. Some people think this might be part of the Super game. Some people think this is a reboot. Some people think this is a whole new game.
They need to nail the art style, and they need to have this game be a success from out of the gate. So I can see why they're so hyper-focused on the look, because the look is what's going to sell it. And I also did find it odd that they just used the Jet Set Radio logo from the first game really big a couple times, rather than giving us any indication of a new game.
What's interesting is when compared to the concept art, there are a few noticeable differences. The first is the lettering on Beat's jacket. The lettering is simply outlined in the video, whereas in the concept art, it is filled in with orange. Another difference is the headphones appear to look darker in color in the concept art, but in the video, take on a more silver-colored appearance. In the leaked video from April 2023, the only character we see is Beat. Keep in mind, if this video is real, it is originally from 2021. But in the leaked concept art from 2022, 2 other characters are present, Gum and Combo. These names are not official, and if these leaks are real, are subject to change. For this, I will be referring to them with those names, as they best represent those characters from previous games. When we take a look at the leaked concept art from 2022, we can see that Combo is dressed in baggy hip-hop attire that feels very 90s Japan, with everything from his checkered sleeves to his popped-up red collar, gold chain, and purple hat.
Combo with his checkerboard sleeves really stands out. And of course, he has the giant yen necklace, but it's not so hilariously large as it used to be.
I appreciated that Combo was in the concept sketch still just kind of a door of a man, which he has to be. It's what makes him super cool.
Meanwhile, Gum is dressed in a lime green hat or beanie with a crop top, gloves, short shorts, and thigh-high stockings to match.
Her little helmet is really goofy, but in a good way. It gives me both Jet Set Radio and Jet Set Radio Future vibes.
One thing that is interesting about her design is her skates, as they seem to match Beats skates, similar in color across the sneaker portion of the skate, but with gray wheels instead of green.
The skates are largely all the same, especially when characters were kind of known for their unique skates. It could be just kind of a time-saving situation where they probably wanted to rush out this concept art and not focus on designing the characters' skates so much.
Their skates do not look like aggressive inline skates anymore. If they're going for a time period that matches this, then I think that works. But if they were trying to make it like the original, then I think it doesn't work.
I actually really like the look of Gum. I really like the look of Combo. It still looks like the characters we know very well.
The fashions that the characters are wearing, definitely, they match the color schemes and the look of the original game more.
And just the surrounding environment, it looks very much so to be inspired by something you would see every day rather than something that's looking towards the future.
Jet Set Radio Future is kind of already a depiction of the future of the original Jet Set Radio. So I think this is like a different future of the first Jet Set Radio.
Jet Set Radio has kind of a better launching pad or foundation to kind of build upon, having a more realistic look in terms of like street fashion rather than that sort of neo-futuristic early 2000s look of Jet Set Radio Future. One's a little more dated than the other, and that's kind of hard for me to say because I really like Jet Set Radio Future.
It feels a little bit too real to me. Everything about what Jet Set Radio embodies is very unreal and unrealistic. I personally prefer the older look. I love how rugged and choppy and blocky everything looks.
Given the possible timeline of these leaks, it would seem that the concept art that was leaked was developed or updated after the video was showcased at the 2021 Sega meeting. In order to theorize where the Jet Set Radio series could be headed and what Jet Set Radio 3 might be like, we first need to take into account the facts. In terms of sales, Jet Set Radio performed significantly better than Jet Set Radio Future, and Sega tends to cling to the first Jet Set Radio game when releasing new merch or having cameos in other Sega games. All that said, it's time to theorize.
With these facts in mind, what do you theorize Sega could have in store for the future of Jet Set Radio?
Probably going to feature like character showcases in other video games to try to warm the public back up, get the people familiar with the franchise again, and then create content. I don't know if there will be another game after that. I hope so, but we'll see.
There was already a Jet Set Radio HD, so I think it could be possible that they would do a remaster of it.
If they were to remake the original Jet Set Radio, they'd have to undergo some pretty serious changes. The structure of the game itself can be a little archaic in some ways, and I'd imagine new players jumping in right now might have a lot of trouble figuring out what exactly they need to do to progress.
If they incorporated some new mechanics, it would only make that game a lot better.
I would be baffled in a good way if we saw a remake or a continuation of the Jet Set series in any way from Sega. I'm sure that the individuals who worked on it, Funky Uncle in particular, I'm sure they would be down, and they still seem to have a lot of encouragement for these games and a lot of fondness for them, but the CEOs are the ones that decide what happens in a lot of those circumstances. So I unfortunately don't feel like it's incredibly likely.
My only concern, and this is just coming from an old school background, is that we're not going to get physical releases. I really like having a game on a disc, even if I am playing the game from a digital download. I still like to have that. So my only concern would be that this would be a game that would not exist on a shelf and also not have a shelf life. Ken Horowitz of Sega 16 gave a presentation at Sonic and Sega Fan Jam in Georgia where he talked about how Fortnite is probably one of the most popular games that is not being properly preserved. There's no real way to play it offline in its older iterations. And once the game's dead, the game as we know it in its, popular state will be dead. We're not going to be able to re-experience that. That's my fear, is that Jet Set Radio 3 would be an always online game with a short shelf life, and if the game's a failure, then in 1 or 2 years after the release, it's gone.
Especially if they decide they really want to kind of market this giant super game project. There is that possibility that this may just be part of that overarching project, and we don't actually get a new game, but it's just going to be, a little section of whatever Sega super game they make. That would be pretty disappointing.
I can't imagine something that's almost Battle Royale-like, where teams of players form gangs and fight over territory in like a big, huge city map, and they'd be like claiming areas using graffiti. And I know it's definitely not something that most fans would be thrilled to see, at least at first, but I can imagine having a lot of fun with something like that nonetheless.
With facts, theories, and potential leaks in mind, it is enough to cause plenty of speculation that Sega could, in fact, be working on the next big Jet Set Radio title. Whether or not the leaks are true, if Sega were to make Jet Set Radio 3, it would likely turn out to be greatly inspired by the first game, given its success at the time. Sega might also consider it a safe choice to pursue a reboot of Jet Set Radio instead of a sequel or remixed reimagining, as this would not only take the franchise back to its roots, but it would reintroduce the series to an entirely new generation. If this is what ends up happening, it is speculated that this could open the door for a possible reboot of Jet Set Radio Future. However, if the new game ends up falling in line with rumors of it mirroring a microtransactional model similar to Fortnite, then I don't think we would get a new Jet Set Radio game for a very long time after that. Sega's entire focus for the intellectual property would be centered on this new online model built around cosmetic purchases and season passes. That isn't to say it couldn't open doors for JSRF-esque content to be added to the game later on.
I'd just love to have Future on a Nintendo Switch. I'd flip out about that. I'd probably throw something through a window or like eat my CRT or something.
Because they're so derivative of the original so often, for guys like me, I just don't think there's a lot of hope for Future being, just brought back in any way, shape, or form. All I really want to see is just give me a console port. Why is Future still stuck on the original Xbox? Just put it on Xbox One and I'll be happy.
If a game that's inspired by what you made 20 years ago is being featured pretty heavily in a Nintendo indie showcase, I think that kind of pulls your attention. I think once Bomber Cyberpunk drops, we're going to hear a lot more about this new Jet Set Radio from Sega.
There's a lot of people within the community that are creating mods or are games that are very reminiscent of Jet Set Radio, like Bomb Rush Cyberpunk, but with its own flair. And so I think creating a new game, people would be a lot more forgiving with that and would be willing to give it a new opportunity.
100%. I would prefer a new Jet Set Radio game with a new original art style, story, designs, etc.
More characterization would be good, a better mini-map. I'd love to see some new areas. You could even move it around a little bit, Wouldn't mind seeing them skate around the snow in like a Hokkaido toe. If I'm gonna get another Jet Set Radio game, I don't need to play essentially another sort of origin story of Rokaku's, taking over everything, and we're the, youth that got to stop him. I'd like to see some, that formula needs to change a little bit. And besides, we've waited long enough. I think we need something a little more experimental with a third Jet Set Radio game, honestly.
I hope that there's a lot more to do as well. I really love tagging and spray painting, but I want there to be other side quests and other things to do. I hope that we get something very similar to Jet Set Radio Future if possible, mainly art style wise and fashion wise.
My other speculation would be that I think we can definitely expect to see Jet Set Radio in animation in the near future. We've yet to hear any leaks or any announcements of a movie or TV show based on Jet Set Radio, but I think they are waiting for this potential third game to come out so that they can do a tie-in.
Always good to be hopeful, just don't get your hopes up too high.
The future of the Jet Set Radio series is one big blank slate. Unfortunately, we can't decide what goes on in it. What we can do is speculate, theorize, and voice our love for the series in whatever means necessary, even if a new Jet Set Radio game never comes.
Something that I brought up with my team whenever we first met to make games is how impactful Jet Set Radio Future in particular was to me as a child, and how the series and its message as a whole stands to me as an adult.
Just bringing people together with these different attributes that just blend so nicely is something that's really awesome. It goes past just like being culturally significant to one person. It's easier to connect to a whole group of people, which is really dope to see.
We will continue that legacy even if the company that allowed it to form does not.
What do you think about the possibility of a new Jet Set Radio game? Have any theories, speculations, or hopes of your own? Let me know in the comments, and I will feature some of your thoughts in a follow-up Q&A video. Thanks for watching, and stay funky.
Do you love me too? Oh yeah.